And so they would register when Mahaprabhu came, and they heard these complaints. They would register them with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And of course by Mahaprabhu's, but they couldn't defeat him, so they were typically, they had faith, but it was tender and it wasn't tempered, as steel would be tempered by heat and made stronger. Their tender faith was not tempered by knowledge of the Shastra. And Shraddha means Bhakti, Shastriya Shraddha. Faith in the argument, in the revelation, in the teaching that comes down and so forth. So they were lacking in that, and so they were, in the Leela, the context of the Leela, they were Kanishthadikaris, like the father and uncle of Raghunath Das Goswami. But there are so many of them, Kanishthadikaris. It's a Leela. So then there's the sannyasis, like Keshava Bharati, and so they would all regard them, and they consider themselves just Kanishthas, and the sannyasi were, so in that sense, they were, in the context of Leela, but they're eternal associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So anyway, of course, as the story goes, then they told Mahaprabhu, they're saying these things about you. And said, well, there's by Mahaprabhu's own arrangement, as the Antaryami, Paramatma, one Brahmin came and said, invited him to come to have lunch with the sannyasis or something like that. I don't think he took lunch with them, but he came. They were invited to their association. He wanted to take his meals with the devotees. So then he went. And what did he do? He sat down where the sannyasis would enter into the assembly, and their feet would be bathed, because they would all walk barefoot. And if you were go inside to a temple, for example, or any place of assembly, then you can see it still in Vrindavan at some temples. So outside the temple there's a pump, a hand pump for washing your feet before you go into the temple. And so Mahaprabhu sat himself down there, and he washed the feet of sannyasis as they were coming in. Prakasthana said, "We're the one we invited here. What are you doing there?" And then they saw in him, in his person, the Brahman effulgence that they were trying to enter into. They saw him like an aura emanate from him of Brahman, and they were just dazzled by that on the one hand, and his humility on the other hand, that he sat at the place for washing the feet. He said, "Please come, don't sit there, come." And by this he created a teaching moment, so that they were like off balance, so to speak. Then Mahaprabhu explained Vedanta to them very nicely. That story is recorded twice in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the Adi Leela in the 7th chapter, and then later in the Madhya Leela, at the end of the Madhya Leela. So it's a very nice section where the basic Vedanta, Advaita, is dealt with by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami through his pen. Mahaprabhu was speaking, and so he defeated them, and of course then Chandrasekhar and Tapamishra. Yay! And I figured that they had attached themselves to a Bhagavad, the person Bhagavad, even if they couldn't read the book of Bhagavad, study it, and become scholars. They were okay. They were serving the person Bhagavad, the person of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yes.
Can I go to another question?
Yeah.
We've heard recently, within the last year, a reference to something attributed to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, wherein he says that we should never think that at any time there is not Sadguru available on the planet, and such a thought is atheism. And then we've also read Bhakti Rakshat Sridhar Dave, some of his talks referring to a time that the current is underground. And right now in the dialogue we're in today, a little bit, this question's come to my mind, how to reconcile those two. Because I'm hearing some people even now are saying that the current is going underground. And I see that as soft rictivism, and I'd like to know how to deal with that current of thought.
Well, of course, the Gita says that at times the teachings are obscured. Evam praptam imam raja shirudi sakalena mahata yoganashta parantapa. And I come, he says, to the parampara. This is the way it's been explained, to reestablish this. So I think that, but that's it. I think that what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is saying is that the seer soul would never lack guidance, and it will be available, and seek and you'll find, or we can say that such persons are available, but then again they may be not very visible. That's also possible. You take during the time of Bhakti, we notice not that there weren't any great souls, but they weren't very visible. Bhakti Vinod then became very visible and created an outreach that went, even beyond India and so forth. That doesn't mean there weren't other great souls at the time, but they weren't. I mean, Jagannath Das Babaji wasn't known by anybody in Calcutta or. Also, I think that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's statement is one that's similar to a statement that Bhaktivinoda Thakur made. It's different, but it's similar in the point, I think, that's being made, and that is that Bhaktivinoda once said that in Kali Yuga, people will give more respect to the previous acharyas. In other words, they'll think, Prabhupada was great, After Prabhupada's gone, he's got many people that say that Prabhupada's great, and at the expense of saying that anybody else is great, which is kind of what you're talking about. So Bhaktivinoda said this was a problem. It means, what it really means is that Bhaktivinoda was experiencing that. That he knew he had something to contribute, but people were not giving attention as they should have. Prabhupada himself felt that way, our Prabhupada, that he was making a contribution, but many people in India, for example, even in Gaudiya Sampradaya, couldn't recognize it. But they would, be quoting the books of Bhakti Vinod and saying, you should publish Bhakti Vinod's book. What are you publishing your own books for? Prabhupada was criticized for that. And so in his own time, what I'm saying, he also experienced what we recognized in his disciples, as many other people didn't recognize. Now he's gone, everybody, Prabhupada's great. Of course, they get that idea from us, because we passed that down, our feeling, sentiment. We published his books, circulated them, and so on and so forth. So I think that Bhaktisiddhanta was also experiencing that. Bhakti Vinod was great, but who are you? And so, and people may have said something like, well, Bhakti Vinod was there, or this one, but now what are we left with? And so he would make a statement like that, to think that there isn't someone, what did he call it? Atheism. I think it's just a strong statement that he's making that really kind of parallels what Bhakti Vinod was saying, the same kind of phenomenon. He's kind of critiquing the idea that, well, there were great devotees, now they're not. Maybe they'll come along later, again at another time, and it's funny how that works, because in saying that, really, they can very much miss out on the opportunity to associate in a meaningful way with persons who are very qualified, very, very, very qualified to help them. And and they need help and so forth. When you take many of Prabhupada's disciples, it's so apparent that they need help. Their understanding of the philosophy, their ability to practice and apply themselves and so forth is very, very limited for many of them. And so they really, it's apparent that they need guidance, but then they say something, well, Prabhupada was great, who could be as great as him? And then the people tend to make their gurus so great that nobody could be that great anyway. So, what are you supposed to come along and say, I'm great? So I just see it happen all the time with so many groups. It's an unfortunate kind of a phenomenon that leaves people. You call it a soft root. It is something like that, and I mean, so many people could have cooperated with Prabhupada. It would have been much greater success. We wouldn't have some of these kind of camps that arguing that you have now had that been the case, but some people couldn't recognize them. So, after they're gone, you recognize them and you think, wow, he really did something. She really did something. Check it out, look at this. Wow, yeah. And then, too bad there's nobody like that now. So that's how it
starts over again.
Yeah, so there's a history of that. And I think that, you can make that point. There's a history of this. That this is, you say this now, but this is being said at the time of Bhakti Vinod. This was being said, Bhakti Siddhanta saying it, in this way. Bhakti Vinod's talking about himself. He's saying it's a phenomenon in Kali Yuga that people will give great regard to the previous Acharya at the expense of recognizing in a meaningful way so that you can take advantage of a present qualified person.
Our Prabhupada used the phrase jumping over.
Jumping over. Yeah, that's another way of going to jumping over to the previous Acharya, like at the cost of taking advantage of someone who's qualified to lead and guide them in the here and the now, and to speak in a relative way relative to the time and circumstance and so forth. It's just part of the territory. It's just part of the territory. It's just a mindset. It'll go on and on and on. Now, you want to try to preach against it now, but you do that. I mean, and anybody like me, for example, I see so many things, and so I preach about them now so that you don't become subject to them. But there'll be other problems, and somebody else will have to come and say, can't see them all, or they don't all manifest at the same time. But some of these problems that have been problems for a few generations, I address them readily so that you won't be under those false impressions or misunderstandings that will harm you in the future or make you less capable of taking advantage of the kind of association that will be available. For example, along these lines. So it's important. And so what? It's a process, right? So when they say, well, Prabhupada was great, and meanwhile, what did he really give was the process. So as long as I can just give you the process, then the process can I don't have to be great. It's really the process that's great. Of course, if you're not great, you can't really give the process either. That's the thing that's missed in that. You don't really understand it. The more advanced you are, the more you understand what the process is, what the teaching is. And so someone can say, well, we're not great, we just give the process. But you're not giving the really good process either. You're giving it full of misunderstandings, and I've seen it in the name of giving the process to people. They're initiating people in some quarters. I've seen this into Vaishnava aparad, conceptions that I think are the part of the philosophy. Like somebody wrote a book about the Siksha Guru, and it said you can only have your Siksha Guru in this particular institution or something like this. Where's that in the Bhagavad Gita? I mean, it could come from anywhere is the point. And we're supposed to go there if we're called and we find you can't confine Krishna, he's only supposed to come here and so forth. So then this is the process, right? The process is the Guru's realization is the process. Whatever he or she understands is what they pass along. So how much of it if they're not even really well versed in the philosophy, then you don't even get the theory right to practice it. And that's you can say, well, does the guru have to be this or that? You can't even tell if the guru is this or that, but you can tell he or she has to be this or that. But then maybe they're more than that. At least you could see. That's why I keep emphasizing these external, observable qualities. If you don't see these things, and one of them being Shabde Pare Nishnatam, knowing the scriptural argument, having some scriptural genius, and so then that guru is not going to help you. You're going to get a facsimile or a what would you call it, a partial distortion of the teaching. And no power to bless.
An emphasis on liberation as opposed to bhakti.
I mean, the guru has to be pleasing Krishna. If pleasing the guru, why does pleasing the guru please Krishna? Because the guru is pleasing Krishna. If the guru is not pleasing Krishna, well, then how does it work, right? How by pleasing that guru, you please Krishna. I offer my obeisances to my spiritual master, who I hope is very dear to the feet of Krishna. I hope. I think he is. He might be. Who might be dear to Krishna? I don't know. This is giving me the process. This is not good. This is not good. We should be convinced about that, and we should be able to explain why we're convinced, based on the philosophies, because we've been taught it. And so then we know, at least, whether he's this, that, other thing. You can use many superlatives, to describe, but at least at a certain level knows the teaching. Risen above Vacho Vega, Manasakroda Vega. Not like Prabhupada said, and they're changing the Acharya every few years. Didn't he used to say? And every few years they're changing. Now this one, that was not working. Now we put this one in. He was complaining.